I'm doing research on the assessment of innovation indicators in Africa. I'm looking at the 3 case studies. Initially, I was very ambitious. I had like 5 countries because I wanted to cover North, South, East, West, and Central of Africa. I had to reduce because that was extremely ambitious of me, and Tunisia at the time, which was my case study, started having problems. So I reduced to 3. And now that I've started, I actually think that 3 is more than enough as well. Points for discussion, I'll be doing introduction and background, taking you through the context and justification for my countries, looking at the expected research contribution, talking a little bit about what I think indicators and measurements are based on what I've researched thus far. Progress to date in terms of the indicators and where I am as a student. This is work in progress for me, so I haven't finished. So don't judge me on the complete indicators, judge me on the fact that it's still a proposal. You might have asked probably yourself, why am I looking at indicators? Most of the international organizations like the OECD, World Bank, United Nations agencies like UNESCO have adopted indicators, and in most cases they've done so because they would like to support research funding. The history of indicators within the OECD is that it it mainly dealt with national income previously. They've added over the years. It dealt with industrial production and productivity. And you might ask yourself, why do we do indicators, or why do we have indicators? They are usually mainly used for monitoring and evaluation over time, and also as a comparison for countries. They are used in policy development and for coordination. They usually form an integral part to programs and policy planning, and they are used for the justification for funding. The relevance of indicators is highly dependent on the policy context. And the most famous saying is, are we measuring the right things? There are problems with measurements, and these are some of the problems that I came across with when I was doing my readings, is that measurements are usually not static, they evolve over time. There are also problems with horizontal projects and product and multidisciplinary projects or problem-oriented research when you look at indicators, especially for if you use like university as an indicator on what you're trying to measure. There are difficulty in establishing data links. And what was discovered was that in the business sector, and also when you do classifications, and this is what they found, for example, in the US, is that when you look at statistics and the economic series, they have different classifications. So therefore, when you're trying to measure or compare, because you are using different information, you obviously get different results or no result. Okay. And this is just a little bit of what the historical perspective on measurements is or was. Is that when it started in the US and then came to the OECD, and some of us are just following through now. In the reasoning for the US was that they discovered that they were not measuring appropriate dimensions of science and technology. And the OECD as well realized that they asked themselves whether they were measuring what they needed to measure. And most of the indicators were concerned with the economic impact, and apparently the economists and policymakers like that. And as you would expect, most of the indicators are done by economists in most countries. And we had theorists and scholars like Solo who integrated SAT on economic growth and productivity models, and that talked more to international trade models, and the main reasoning for that was on competitiveness. And then you also had the UNESCO classification, where originally their measure was not on R&D classification, but on qualification of S&T. And what I'm asking is, what is the motivation for us as Africans? That's why my question was, are we just following what the West have done? Do we have a rationale for why we are doing indicators? I'm still trying to look for those answers. I don't have the answers yet. Yeah, that's my research question. And I'm also asking whether the indicators are sensitive to local, social, and economic conditions, or are they merely replicating what has been done somewhere else? That's Africa, Ghana. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see where Ghana is?
You have the pointer.
Where's the pointer? Oopsie. Okay. This is Ghana. Ghana is here, South Africa is here, Tanzania is here. So Ghana is covering part of West Africa. South Africa is obviously in the south. Tanzania is East Africa. And when I changed and reduced my countries, I then focused on Sub-Saharan Africa. And Sub-Saharan Africa refers to the rest of Africa below North Africa. And sometimes it also excludes West Africa. And my reasons for choosing South Africa, South Africa and Ghana is their geopolitical history. All the three countries are English speaking. All of them were colonized by the British, so they have kind of a common Anglo-colonial history. And I think this is important because the geopolitics is very important when you look at some of the things like indicators. The good thing with all the three countries is that they are kind of the success stories of Africa, because they've all had successful transitional democracies and therefore provide stability over time. As I already told you, I wanted to look at Tanzania, but not Tanzania, Tunisia, and that's when they had the fight, and then I had to change my whole thinking and came up with this justification. The methodological justification is that I'll be looking at data sets, and I do hope that I will find those in the three African countries. I will also be doing qualitative data collection based on semi-structured interviews. And the reason why I'm using the case study as my methodology is that I believe that it can be used for multiple data sources. I already mentioned the other part. And what I hope to achieve with my study on looking on indicators with specific reference to Africa is that I hope that at a practical level, it will provide evidence on innovation indicators in Africa. It will also guide the innovation indicator framework. So at the end of my research, I hope to come up with a framework. On a policy level, I hope that when policymakers when they develop and adapt indicators, that that whole process, I hope that it's an innovation on itself. What has happened so far in Africa is that we had 22 countries out of the 54 countries that were surveyed. The survey was funded by the IDRC. There is a report called the African Innovation Outlook report, and this is just a summary of what it found. And out of the 22 countries I took out my countries, which are Ghana, South Africa, and Tanzania. And they found that the survey years that the countries had were in 2007 and 8, South Africa 2007, Tanzania also 7 and 8. South Africa is the only country, if you check on my heading, I've put the 1% growth. You might know, or perhaps not, that some African ministers met some years ago and they decided on having at least a percentage growth of R&D expenditure on the GDP. None of the countries have achieved that. Only South Africa in, two, in 20, in 2010, I think was close to 0.9 in Tunisia. All the countries cannot even, they're not even coming closer to 1%. UNESCO also did a study, so there are reports available for all these countries. And what is important is what is it that the study found? The study found that there is overwhelming evidence that points to the continued weakening of scientific institutions. There's an emergence of S&T indicators, and this was highlighted by Fred Gold. And I think for me, what has been the greatest inspiration is also the Latin American researchers who were the first to table a systematic discussion on the contextualization of the traditional innovation indicators in the Bogota Manual. The authors pointed out that the Oslo Manual guidelines fell short on a number of respects. At the end, what I hope to do is to come up with a framework, because I don't think the current indicators as they stand are sufficient for Africa. There are so many challenges that we experience in Africa, and those are some of the things that I think needs to get into the indicators. How we will be able to measure that remains a challenge. How you measure the informal economy, it's a continuous debate. There are emerging issues on sustainable development. We've got indigenous knowledge system, which is not sufficiently captured and measured. Although education is allocated within the innovation indicators, when you measure in Africa, the basic challenge starts from early childhood development, before you even start talking about the PhD. What I think in the US they like calling the pipeline, where it starts, the root cause of education. The multinational corporations, when you look at economics, if you come from the West, the role of multinational corporation is kind of different to what we have in Africa. I always hear of the positives when I'm in meetings like this, but how they behave when they're in African countries is different. We have the issues of the brain drain. While some have brain drain, there's the issue of the science vote, because when the ministers agreed on that 1%, what they probably didn't realize, or they did, but they're not adhering to. Yeah, I'm almost done. Where was I? Okay. There's also the whole issue of beneficiation and value adding on the resources that we have. And of particular importance is also the role of women and youth, because we have a large youth sector that is educated sometimes, and the issues of unemployment. My acknowledgements, real team, sponsors, supervisors. Oh, my reference list.
Well, that's me again. Desiree.
Yes.
I read your paper, and again, with the last presentation in the morning, we have here a project and not yet results. And to be very frank, I'm quite worried about the direction of your project. I think that first of all, you need to work more the definition of innovation in these three countries. What's the meaning of innovation in South Africa, in Ghana, in Tanzania? Is it the same for the three countries, or might it be different in each one of them? And even within each of these countries, innovation may mean different things for different sectors of the economy. You have the urban economy, the rural economy, you have the informal sector, you have in South Africa a relatively sophisticated manufacturing sector. So the meaning of innovation might be different between the countries, and even within each one of the countries, you can find different understandings of what innovation is. For some companies in South Africa, innovating might be to develop entirely new technologies, new products, and patent them both domestically and abroad in the West, in Europe, and trying to benefit from that patent technology. But for many other companies, innovation might be to import foreign capital goods, or eventually to adapt traditional processes and to do what we could call incremental innovation. That could be innovation. Or innovation might be the introduction of new management techniques, new processes of quality control, new ways of getting to the market, innovation in terms of the logistic chain. So I think that the first step is to decide, to discuss what is the meaning of innovation in these countries. So for me this is absolutely necessary, so that if you want to study innovation indicators, first of all, you have an understanding of what innovation is, okay? Second point, what innovation indicators are you interested to analyze? You just speak about innovation indicators in your project, in the outline of your research project, but are you more interested in innovation indicators, let's say, in the tradition, in the old OECD tradition of the Frascati manual, or are you interested in more innovation indicators in connection to the Oslo manual and the innovation surveys which have been carried out over the last 20 years in Europe and elsewhere? So it's very, very important if you want to study the implementation of innovation indicators in these countries, that you provide some information, you discuss what sort of innovation indicators you are interested to study and to analyze. And then, after you have defined what innovation indicators you are interested in, you may carry out an evaluation exercise, a critical exercise of those innovation indicators. After having defined what innovation is, first step. Second step, what innovation indicators, are they adequate to measure innovation in these countries or not? You see? So I think that there are very fundamental steps which are preliminary, and I think that would be very useful for you to do that sort of steps. Then you have said just a few minutes ago that you intended to study, to analyze 5 countries, but that was too ambitious. I don't know. Maybe it could have been interesting to study 20 African countries or 25 African countries instead of studying just 3. I think that it depends very much how deep you want to go, what sort of information you want to use, and of course the difficulties that you might have in finding the necessary information. But I think the bigger the number of countries, the more interesting in principle might be your thesis, So I'm not so sure whether by reducing the scope of your analysis, you'll bring more value added. Of course, you can get into the political process of indicator implementation and so on, to interview the ministers, to interview the people in charge of the statistical office and so on. And in that case, maybe just 2 or 3 countries is the best option. But I'm not so sure. I think that the more countries you might have, the more valuable would be your exercise, But that depends very much on the sort of sources of information you have, the access to those sources of information and so on. You say in your paper that you want to use statistical databases which exist in the statistical offices and in other organizations. Are you sure that you have access to those statistical databases? Are you sure that you can compare the information in those different statistical databases? I'm not so sure of that, So I think that there are very, very fundamental things that you have to assess before starting to do your field work, to do your research in terms of implementing your framework of analysis. So another point I think that might be useful for you is to see whether there are best practices in Africa in terms of implementation of innovation indicators. Is there any country which have implemented a system of innovation indicators and which has been successful in terms of measuring innovation? And more than that, as the information which has been gathered has been important for the government to define innovation policies, or even private business to design innovation strategies. I think this question on whether there might be a best practice could be important, and then you might refer all your case studies to that best practice, you see? So I think that could be also important. So I have just a few more suggestions for your work. I think that it might be important for you to have a chapter on the history of innovation measurement. You have some lines in your project outline about that, but I think it would be very important to know what has been done in Europe, what has been done in North America, what has been done in South America. And there is a rich experience here in Brazil, in a few other Latin American countries, and I think that could be very important to see what has been done in all these different areas of the world. One thing which strikes me is that in the United States, that is one of the most innovative countries in the world, whatever is our reference, there are no innovation indicators. They have lived without innovation indicators. Why? I think this sort of reflection might be important for you. So, second suggestion, there is a wide literature on innovation measurement and innovation indicators. People like Anthony Randall, we have lectured to this academy in previous years, Hugo Landers, Ariolf Group, Daniel Archibugi. They have papers which are quite important about innovation measurement and about specifically about indicators of innovation, and which are not in your references. Third and last suggestion. Just try to find out what the UNESCO Statistics Institute is doing about innovation indicators. They have very, very important work on this. And I know that they have the intention to promote a global innovation survey next year. So there is a lot of work they are doing right now. And I guess that they have a lot of information also about what's happening in Africa in terms of innovation measurement. So it's quite important. I don't know, the UNESCO Statistics Institute is headquartered, I guess, in Montreal. Maybe Professor Niosi has some more information about their work on innovation indicators, and maybe he can give you some hints about that. So that's my comments.
So I'm going to give some comments. I hope it will be not a kind of repetition as the professor gives some comments. As she said, and we can see that it is proposal. So proposal and means like theses are two different things. And first I was thinking that proposal is very difficult, but now I think proposal is very easy, because we can just say like means I will do and I will do and I will do. But we want and what we get are two different things. So I think the conclusion of this proposal will totally depend on the final version of this writing. May I assume that means like you use innovation indicators and innovation system. If I think you are using it as interchangeably. So if you are using it as interchangeably, then I think you should change your title, and instead of indicators, you should mention innovation system. And if it is not, means if you think innovation system and innovation indicators are two different things, then I think you should try to give some explanation about the innovation indicators. So what do you mean? As you have just mentioned, only one line, that innovation indicators are the measurement instrument of the result of an outcome of science, innovation, and technology. But I think in the research thesis, and especially in the PhD thesis, it should be very clear what do you mean by innovation indicator, as the professor also mentioned. And I just read a few papers about the African innovation system. So I already suggested to you, and if you need some more, I hope I can help you, because I read your paper. And instead of writing the case study of 3 countries separately, so I would suggest that you can like compare these 3 countries. We from the very beginning we are mentioning that we should have like comparative study, And if you are not comparing these three countries' innovation system, then you should try to find some framework. And if you can, first you should try to make your own framework. And if you cannot develop your own framework, then you can take from the existing frameworks. And the same framework you can apply on the three countries, and hopefully you can get some results. And it would be also very nice if you can give some tables and figures, because I think it can means very easy understanding to the readers to understand the main idea. And just the others means like we all are in the learning stage, so we need, and hopefully we will have one session, one lecture how to write thesis and research thesis. So hopefully we can get many answers in that lecture, how to write a paper and how it means references and those kind of things. And I hope, and other thing means you can, as the professor mentioned, you can also read some literature review papers, not like the research article, but sometimes we have like review papers. So review paper, they collect a lot of papers, and so you can read some review paper on national innovation systems. And in the review paper, we can also get an idea how to make our how to write our main concept, and how to convey our message in a flow and in a sequence kind of steps. And I hope this research would come with a fruitful contribution. Further data analysis and methodology would contribute a lot. Otherwise, I'm afraid it should not look like a report. So I hope it's going to be helpful. Thank you very much.